the first question today is for Ivor.
Yeah.
Yesterday we learned about this verse that says, Vayizkor Elokim es Noach. All for Dave, actually. So that Hashem remembered Noach and all the animals, etc., that were in the ark. Where do you know that verse from?
From Noach.
From Musaf on Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
That's where we say it.
That's
In
an easy one.
in
Oh,
in
no.
Musaf
Come on, Dave.
in Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, there's a section called Zichronos,
Yes.
where we speak about the various elements of how Hashem should remember us, and we quote various verses, how Hashem should remember the Jewish people in a positive light. Makes sense. Here it is. It's Rosh Hashanah. Obviously, we're davening for us and for our community, so we're speaking about how Hashem should remember us in a positive light. And one of the verses right at the beginning of Zichronos, one of the very first verses that we quote, is this verse. Vayizkor Elokim es Noach, that Hashem remembered Noach and the animals, etc., etc. Now, the question is, how does that come to Rosh Hashanah? It didn't happen on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so you'd argue some of the other verses also didn't happen on Rosh Hashanah. They're just on the theme of Hashem remembering us in a good light. But if you have a look at all the other themes or all the other verses, they're talking about us. We're talking about the Jewish people. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's a holiday of the Jewish people. We want Hashem to remember the Jewish people in a positive light. Noach was not a Jewish person. To the contrary, Noach is seen as the father of all humanity. So when we want to refer to the broader world, we speak about the children of Noach. When we want to speak about the code of morality that applies to every human on the planet, regardless whether you're Jewish or not, we call it the Noachide laws. So Noach is not somebody who's exclusively Jewish. Why make the verse about Noach being saved or being allowed out of the ark as one of the things that Hashem should remember? That's the first question.
Remember not to do the floods.
Oh, okay. So you're going to say to remember not to do the flood. That's not what the verse is talking about. The verse is not talking about not doing the flood. The verse is saying Hashem remembered Noach, that he allowed him out of the ark. It's a very specific story and a very specific piece of history with a very specific person who is not necessarily a father of the Jewish nation. So, how does it come into our davening? That should be something that the entire world should say as part of their prayers. Now, you spoke about the fact that Hashem says he's not going to make a flood again. When did that happen? When did Hashem tell us that he's not going to make a flood again?
After it happened.
After Noach comes out of the ark. So after Noach comes out of the ark, it says that he brings different offerings to Hashem. And after that, Vayorach Hashem es reach hanichoyach. Hashem, whatever it means,
Rainbow.
smelled the good smell of the sacrifices that Noach brought. And then Hashem said, I promise I'm never going to bring another devastating flood that will wipe out humanity. And here's the sign, the rainbow. All of that happens after Noach leaves the ark, which means that there's got to be a link between Hashem remembering Noach, Noach leaving the ark, and then the covenant that Hashem makes, which is to promise that the world will never be destroyed. Incidentally, there's another detail in this promise as well. Besides the fact that Hashem promises he's not going to destroy the world again, there's another detail that he says as well. Anybody know what the other detail is? He makes another promise about the reality of the world in which we live. Besides the fact that he's never going to wipe it out again, there's another promise that he makes in the same conversation. What's the promise? So let's think for a second. For the 1 year of the flood, what happened to the natural experiences of the world? They all ceased. So for example, big thing, there were no seasons. When Hashem makes the covenant that he's not going to destroy the world again, part of the covenant is, and he promises that the seasons will never be disrupted again. Tell it to the climate change people. But he promises that the seasons will not be disrupted
All
again.
the fish obviously survived.
Correct. Not all the fish. There's a debate in the Midrash. One opinion says that only the fish that were in the immediate vicinity of the ark survived, because the Torah describes eruptions of volcanic material that were also part of the flood, and that would have wiped out many of the fish.
About sulfur.
So, correct, about sulfur, exactly. So therefore it would seem that fish that had to be around the ark. There was almost like this safe zone around the ark where the fish could survive. But the fact is that the world was disrupted in every respect, and so part of the promise is not only will I not destroy the world, but I'm going to ensure that the seasons remain intact and in place. So all of these things are going to be linked to each other. Why we speak about this in the Rosh Hashanah davening? The link between Hashem remembering Noach and therefore taking him out of the ark and therefore making the promise that he's never going to destroy the world again. The link between that and him, whatever it means when it says that Hashem smelt the pleasant smell of the offerings that Noach brought, and the link to the idea that the seasons are never going to be disrupted again. That's all going to land up in one theme. And in order to understand what that theme is, let's ask a very fundamental question that goes right to the beginning of creation, and that is, why did Hashem create our reality, our universe? What does he need us for? Hashem is infinite, Hashem is perfect. Apparently he doesn't need the input of human beings. We're going to get up now in a few minutes, we're going to go daven, we're going to, our garbled davening, our mispronunciations, our rushing through I don't think that's what he needs. So why did Hashem create the world? What was the purpose of creation? So the purpose of creation is that we should fulfill the Torah. Even though we do it in a hackneyed fashion, and we're not necessarily the most spiritually intact people, and we mess up on a regular basis, and even the things that we do right, we don't necessarily always do with the best intentions, we don't always do it in the best way possible. Nevertheless, that's what Hashem decided. He chose that the purpose of creation is that we, Jewish people, by following the Torah, and the rest of the world by following the Noachide code and bringing morality and value to the world, that's going to be the purpose. That's why he created the world. So now, when Hashem remembers Noach, what does he remember? Oh, there's a nice man. Out of everybody on the planet, everybody else behaved in the most obscene way. But here was one nice man who behaved well, and he listened, and I gave him a job to build an ark, and he did it, and he collected all the animals. So I remember him. Is that what it means? That Hashem remembered him? There's a song that the kids sing. Noach was a big tzaddik. Okay, so thank you very much. You're a great guy. So therefore, is that what it means? Can't be. And besides which, the whole idea that Hashem remembers something is such a strange concept. Because that implies what? Did Hashem forget that now he had to remember? So whenever we use the term about divine memory, about Hashem remembering something, what we're effectively saying is Hashem prioritizes a particular ideal or a particular concept. So when we say remember us in a good light, what we're saying is there are many things. You have a plan that is a multifaceted plan. Prioritize the plan to care for us and to look after us. That's really what we mean when we say remember. It's not like you've forgotten and we're like, yanking the chain and knocking on the door and saying, hey, hello, do you remember us? That's not the intention. The intention is place us at a high level of priority. Think about it in human experience. If you've forgotten something and now you remember it, it raises in priority. Now I have to address it because I've remembered it. So it's not that Hashem remembers a man called Noach who's floating around somewhere in the sea. Oops, I forgot about him. It's been a year. Just left him out at sea. What it means is that Hashem at that time prioritizes the reason for which he created the world. He did not create the world to have everybody locked up in an ark, trapped in the middle of this endless water. Why did he create a world? So that we should affect the world. We should have a positive impact on the world. We should elevate the world. And so therefore, what Hashem remembers is that not just the man Noach and his family, but who's going to come from that family, which will eventually, and this is obviously the part that's relevant to us on Rosh Hashanah, and is essentially the core focus of existence, eventually out of one part of that family is going to come a man called Avraham, who is going to stimulate a very high level of dedication to Hashem, and is eventually going to become the father of a Jewish nation. So that's what he remembers. This is why I created the world. And that's why we mentioned that verse on Rosh Hashanah, because we're saying that you have to remember why we're here. Remember that we are here to service the purpose for your world, which is to do your mitzvahs, to learn Torah, etc. That's why Hashem would make a commitment that he's never going to destroy the world again, because it has a purpose. If the world had no purpose, if it was just an experiment, and we'll see what happens, if the people get it right, then we'll sustain the world. If the people get it wrong, then we'll destroy the world. Okay, then we're hanging on a thread. But when Hashem remembers, so to speak, prioritizes the fact that the whole reason to create existence in the first place is for us, not because we're going to get it perfect, not because we're always going to do exactly what Hashem wants, but because we're going to do our level best, and because we're going to consistently, across history, keep contributing to his mission and his plan. So therefore, he's not going to destroy the world. Now, it goes a lot deeper than this, because there's a very interesting midrash. The midrash says, "Vayorach Hashem esreach anichoich." Again, Noach gets out of the ark, and one of the first things that he does is he brings offerings to Hashem. And then it says Hashem smells the pleasant odor. So everybody reads this and says, he smells the braai. He smells the roasting meat, and therefore Hashem says, oh, gewaldig, I'm never going to destroy the world again, which is ridiculous. Obviously, there's no way in the world that the smell of roasted meat is going to change Hashem's attitude to the world.
No, you haven't tasted mine.
Exactly. Right? And then it should have said the taste of the meat. So what does this mean, the smell? The Midrash says something very intriguing. It's very clear that the smell is from the fire, from the roasting of the meat. And so therefore the Midrash says, actually what Hashem smells is he smells the furnace, the smell of the fire of the furnace, that in a generation from now, such a few generations from now, Abraham would be thrown into the furnace. Remember, there's that story where Nimrod was the king at the time, and he was very upset at the fact that Abraham was teaching monotheism when he was trying to teach everybody that he was a god. So he challenged Abraham, and he said, okay, you've got to pick a side now. Do you believe that I'm a god, or do you believe in this single invisible God that you're telling everybody about? And if you're going to stick to your guns, I'm going to throw you into a furnace. It's called Ur Kasdim, the story of Ur Kasdim. And Abraham, of course, gets thrown into the furnace, and he survives. So the Midrash says it's the smell of that fire that Hashem is smelling in the sacrifice that Noach brings. But the Midrash doesn't stop there. The Midrash continues. A few generations later, at the time of the Babylonian exile, there were 3 individuals called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they had a similar challenge. When they were taken into the Babylonian exile, they had a similar challenge, whether to bow down to an idol or to be thrown into a furnace. So they also get thrown into a furnace. The Midrash says that smell of that fire, of that furnace, is what Hashem was smelling in the fire of the sacrifice that Noach brought. Again, what does it mean that Hashem remembers Noach? It doesn't mean that he remembers the man Noach. He remembers that human beings, specifically the Jewish nation, are going to fulfill the divine mission in this world. And so he's smelling, whatever that means, it's obviously not literal, the dedication that these great people are going to have through the course of history, where they'll be dedicated to Hashem to the extent of being willing to sacrifice their lives. But the Midrash doesn't stop there. The Midrash says, and Hashem smells the smell of the generations of Shmad. What are the generations of Shmad? Any time in Jewish history that Jewish people were given the choice to either give up their faith or die, so whether it was, the cross or the sword, or whether it was the auto da fe, or whichever one it happened to be, so through the course of history, multiple times, the Jewish people had to make that choice, like Abraham had to make. Are you going to go into the furnace, or are you going to relinquish your faith in God? Like Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So built into that fire of the offerings of Noach is the aroma, is the flavor of this incredible dedication to Hashem that was going to happen again and again and again and again throughout history, which is hundreds, probably tens of thousands of stories of sacrifice of Jewish people who died for their faith. That's all embedded in this moment of Noach. In other words, when Hashem takes Noach out of the ark, it's not a man and his floating zoo. It's the whole of history captured in that moment saying, this is why I created a world. I created a world because there are going to be people with that level of dedication. Now, why would we be in a position that we have to make that kind of a choice between, God forbid, giving up Judaism, or God forbid, giving up our lives. Why does that happen? How could it be in Hashem's world that there could be such negativity, such anti-Semitism, such an opposition to godliness that we have to now fight to the extent that either you die or you lose your Judaism? How does that happen? How does that happen? Because of Elokim. Yesterday we spoke about the idea that there are two channels of energy that flow into this world. One is represented by the name Elokim, that is the realm of strictness, and the other is represented by the name Hashem, and that is the realm of compassion. If Hashem would run the world purely with compassion, then there'd be no space in this world for hate. There'd be no space in this world for opposition to godliness. There'd be no space in this world for anti-Semitism. It wouldn't be possible. But because Hashem also introduced into the world the concept of Elokim, which means strictness, or more specific to our story, it means filtering or hiding godliness. So when you hide godliness, then it is possible for people to lose their way, and to lose their way in such a profound, to such a profound degree that they now fight against godliness and against the people who are trying to introduce godliness into the world. In other words, Hashem has a purpose. We're here to fulfill that purpose. The way in which we fulfill that purpose is by doing Torah and mitzvahs. But because Hashem designed a world where godliness does not stare out at you from every corner of the world, right? When last were you driving and there was a big billboard that said, Ein oid malvado, there's nothing else besides Hashem. A lot of the billboards that are out there, you shouldn't necessarily even look at. Because the reality of our world is that it is a concealment of godliness. It is a place of Elokim. That's why there are so many challenges to doing what we're supposed to do. Nobody gets up in the morning and the first thing is, today I am davening and learning and doing mitzvahs. Business, that can wait. It's not how we're wired. It's not how the world operates. Nobody opens up the Siddur, and just like that, the mind connects, like a Wi-Fi, As soon as you open the Siddur, you have this 5G connection. That doesn't work that way. We have to battle along. We feel distracted. We feel all kinds of... Why? Because Bereshis bara Elokim. Because the way that Hashem created the world is Elokim, with a tremendous amount of divine concealment. Now we'd ask the question, why does it have to be like that? Why does it have to be so difficult, such an uphill battle, so much opposition? Why is it that every single time that we think we're getting comfortable in the world, finally the world is accepting the Jewish nation, finally they're supportive of our belief system and of our connection to Hashem, guess what? There's always a surprise around the next corner. Somebody's found a way to generate hatred and to generate some kind of opposition to godliness and to the Jewish ideal. Why? Why does it have to be that way? So some people will tell you that, such is life. Life isn't fair. Who was it? I forget. I think it might have been Groucho Marx that they said. I don't remember who said it. But there was somebody who once said, the chosen people, can't you choose somebody else for a change? There's so much tzuras, choose somebody else for a change. Why is that? So the answer is that, as we learned yesterday, even when Hashem employs strict judgment in the world, Elokim, it always has to first pass through and be mitigated by the concept of rachamim, of compassion. That's why we learned yesterday that even when Hashem wants to wipe out the entire humanity by the flood, which name of Hashem do we use? Not Elokim, the name of judgment, but Havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hashem, the name of compassion. Because even if there's going to be a heavy-duty action that's going to, hurt people, it has to have an element of compassion. That means that even if there's going to be a major challenge in our lives, whether it is a challenge to the extent of being thrown into a furnace for our Judaism, or whether it's the challenge in the sense of, how difficult it is to pay for kosher chickens, or whatever the particular challenges that we have to recognize that every one of those challenges has built inside it divine compassion.
Rabbi, where does the two Yuds come from then?
It's a good question. It would appear that was just something the printers introduced in order to not print out Hashem's name in full.
Okay.
I don't know exactly. So now the thing is,
So does that only appear in the Siddur?
no, I think in many Jewish
In the
books.
Torah?
No, not in the Torah. Definitely not in the Torah.
Okay, so it's a man.
Only in printed works.
Thank you.
So now, what does that mean? Hashem smells this beautiful smell of the dedication that people have in difficult times. In other words, why does Hashem introduce difficult times? To elicit out of us this incredible dedication which makes the whole of existence worthwhile. Again, Vayizkor Elokim es Noach. Why does Hashem remember Noach? He doesn't just remember the man, he remembers the mission. He remembers that this is why I created a world, so that there will be individuals who will commit themselves to my ideals. They'll commit themselves to Torah mitzvahs, even when it's hard. That's why I created a world. Why did I create a world of judgment, of difficulty? Because in that difficulty, human beings will rise to the occasion. Jewish people will show a tremendous amount of dedication that is going to be so amazing that it will make the entire project worthwhile. When Hashem says that's how it's going to be, that people are going to push through the difficult times, that they're going to overcome the Elokim in order to access the Hashem dimension, then obviously I'm not going to destroy such a world. That's why we say this on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, we're effectively saying, why are we here? What's the purpose of existence? What's the purpose of being Jewish? The purpose is to work through the difficult times, to make those sacrifices, because that will ensure the continuity and sustainability of existence. Not only that Hashem will never have to or want to destroy the world ever again, because look how amazing our dedication is, but that he'll keep the world running with seasons that constantly repeat themselves in a predictable fashion. It's so funny, because like every single year, people are surprised by the weather. Every single year, right? You have somebody say, I can't believe how cold it is. Yeah, well, it's cold winter. That's what happens. It gets cold. People say, I can't believe that it rained on Sukkot. Yeah, well, rain happens every single year at the same time. It happens to be Sukkot. You know, that's how it is. So there's a predictability to the seasons. Why is it so important that the seasons repeat in a predictable fashion? Because something that recurs again and again and again is an indication of the fact that there's an investment of something infinite. In other words, something which is finite cannot keep repeating and cannot keep sustaining. It's going to eventually run out. So for example, you've got a battery, yes? And you've got a battery in your phone. So you charge your phone. The battery runs, then the battery dies. You charge your phone, the battery runs again, then the battery dies, you charge your phone. What happens about 6 months before the end of your phone contract? The battery doesn't work so well anymore. Why? Because it's finite. You can't just keep recurring and recurring and recurring and repeating the same process again and again and again. Eventually it dies. Eventually it cannot work anymore. The fact that the seasons repeat again and again and again and again for thousands of years, that's an indication not only that Hashem creates a world because it's an important project, but he invests his infinite energy into that world because that's how important this project is. Why does Hashem invest his infinite energy in this world? Because we invest our infinite dedication to Hashem. What do you mean infinite dedication? That's like a weird expression. Because when you're willing to make dedication to do the right thing, even when it comes at a major cost, even like Abraham at cost potentially to his life, being thrown into a furnace. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, with such great risk that they were thrown into a furnace. The generations of Shmad who were willing to sacrifice everything, that is an indication that we have an infinite connection, or shall we say an unlimited connection to Hashem. That's what earns us the status for unlimited investment from Hashem into his world. That's what it means when it says Vayizkor Elokim. Hashem, so to speak, prioritized the idea that he's created a world of challenge, so that we'll step up to those challenges. So we'll make those sacrifices. So that will introduce Hashem, the greatest compassion and brocha, into the world. And we, through our efforts, will make the world a sustainable place with Hashem's, so to speak, infinite investment. So every time we stand up to do something which is difficult in our Yiddishkeit, that's what we achieve.
Shkach, thank you.